Hey, Gator fans, just wanted to hop on here really quickly. This is just going to be a quick video, but I wanted to talk to you about a statement that Dan Mullen made yesterday doing a podcast, and it just was so insane, blew my mind, felt like it was worth hopping on here and chatting with you guys for a minute. But if you haven't heard the clip, here it is.
Do you think Lane would leave Ole Miss where he has them going right now to eventually take over Florida?
You know what's pretty funny? When I got let go at Florida a couple of years ago, they asked me, and I said, "Hey, I'd go hire Lane Kiffin right now." I said, "If you're going to get rid of me, I'd go hire Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss right now." He kind of has that little bit of that, Florida. They love points. He's going to continue the offense to run points. He's walking in. Walking in with an Anthony Richardson. You're walking in with a top 5 draft pick at quarterback, so the program's in good shape offensively that way. There are some high-powered receivers committed and on the roster, and so I think he would have been a great fit right off the bat. But that was several years ago, and he's now gotten Ole Miss to being in playoff contention. So I don't know if that's something that would interest him or not. It'd be, you never know in the coaching profession why. Maybe someone's making a decision. They're going to have their personal or whatever reason to do it. But I think a couple of years ago, he probably would have taken the job if offered it to him.
Wait, so when they were firing you, and I know you had a long relationship with Florida, they asked you who should replace you?
I think we were just talking, and I said, "Hey, because you're getting let go, and there's still a game left in the season." And saying that, and I said, "Hey, I said, you guys got to go hire a coach." And I told that to the athletic director. I'd go hire Scott. I told Scott Strickland I'd go hire Lane Kiffin if I were you right now, because what if Florida wants points? They love that kind of that swagger, that attitude that Spurrier used to bring everybody. The coaches, all the coaches have been successful there have had, and I thought he would kind of fit right into that role and help move them forward, especially give him the administrative support, finally have a facility, have a budget, let him create a recruiting budget that's competitive and have that support. He would do well with it.
Okay, so kind of a lot happened in a very short amount of time that I want to address in there. First and foremost, Dan Mullen came to Florida because Scott Strickland was his athletic director from Mississippi State. And yes, Dan has a relationship with Florida prior to going to Mississippi State, but think about the relationship you build as a head coach and an athletic director, particularly when you're turning the program around. Think about what Mullen was able to do at Mississippi State. They're close. So I know that there are people out there that are skeptical that this conversation happened. I've seen it on social media, but I 100% believe that the conversation happened because they are, I don't know if friends is the right word, but they know each other incredibly well. It has been rumored that Scott Strickland does not like Lane Kiffin and that he has said things in the past about Lane Kiffin will never be the coach at Florida. I don't know if that's true or not. That's conjecture at this point, but that could be why he didn't go after him. And, I think it's kind of mind-blowing that a coach that we fired understands more about what the fan base is looking for in a head coach than the athletic director that's doing the hiring. Because Dan Mullen is absolutely 150% correct. Florida wants somebody with swagger. They want somebody that's going to score points. They want somebody with that cocky attitude that Spurrier had, that Urban had. It doesn't mean that you have to be, a jerk, right? But you've got to have a little bit of swag to you. And I do think Mullen had that. I think Will Muschamp had that. And I absolutely think Spurrier and Urban had it. But the coaches that I think in recent memory that you can pin as the most successful at Florida, whether or not their tenure ended up with a national championship or not, the most successful coaches, the most wins came from guys that did have a little chip on their shoulder, come with a little bit of spunk and spice. And I think that is absolutely not what Coach Napier is. And it's almost like with this advice from Mullen that Scott Strickland did the exact opposite, right? He went somebody that is bland and even keel and, dare I say, boring as a head coach. It obviously didn't have an offense that is, prone to putting up tons of points. But think about if UF had hired Lane Kiffin 3 years ago, right? He'd be coming in with Anthony Richardson. And Mullen is right. We did have a lot of offensive weapons committed. Most of those guys didn't stick when Napier was hired. And who knows if they didn't stick because it was Napier or they didn't stick, because they got more attractive offers elsewhere or whatever. But had Lane been able to hold on to some of those offensive weapons, and then you think about the fact that he had Anthony Richardson, who was a top 5 draft pick on that roster, UF would have put up some points. UF, I think, would have been in a better position than they are now. And think about what Ole Miss was versus what Ole Miss is now. I mean, they are competing for a spot in the playoffs this year. They look at this moment, if you had to predict who would be in, you would say Ole Miss is going to the playoffs. So, Lane Kiffin has built a program that I think for a long time people thought wasn't capable of getting to the promised land. And right now, they're sitting in a really good spot. So, is Lane the guy for UF to go after now? I know he's who UF wants, right? UF wants somebody exactly as Mullen described. Cocky, a little bit of swagger, putting up a ton of points, has a fun offense to watch. When you look at the college football landscape, who does that describe better than Lane Kiffin? Nobody's name comes to mind more than him when you look at what UF is trying to accomplish. And how insane is it if Scott Strickland, it was recommended that he make that hire 3 years ago and he didn't, and he goes ahead and makes it now? That to me is maybe the most damning part of all of this. You could have gotten him way cheaper. You could have provided this program stability. You could have UF in a much better place potentially had you gone with Lane Kiffin then, and you did not. So if you hire him now, does that mean you made a mistake back then? And should you be allowed to make that mistake? Should you be allowed to make a third hire? I personally don't know that I think you do. But if he gets to hire Lane Kiffin, if Scott Strickland gets to hire Lane Kiffin, does that save Strickland's job if it goes well? Is he allowed to stay as the athletic director? Is he allowed to, kind of course correct there? I saw the most wild stat on X yesterday. It was from Neil and All Kinds of Weather. And he said that if Napier wins the next 14 games, he will not have the same winning percentage still as Ron Zook. Think about that. You think Lane Kiffin over the last 3 years would have had the record that Napier had? Do you think Lane Kiffin maybe would have put up some more points with the weapons that UF has had? Do you think maybe he'd have done a little bit better in the transfer portal? Do you think there would have been some fire and energy on the sidelines? These are all what ifs at this point, right? But if I was a betting person, I would bet that Florida would have been in a better position today had they listened to Dan Mullen on his way out the door 3 years ago. And that is pretty wild to think about. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Lots of good content coming your way. Saturday, noon Eastern time, we take on Mississippi State. Hopefully we can pull out a victory in All Kinds of Weather. As always, go Gators.